Can I, can I sit with you? The voice was shaking, barely a whisper over the clatter of silverware and the hum of conversation. The entire diner seemed to go dead silent in a heartbeat. Standing there was a 75-year-old woman, looking like she was about to faint, clutching a broken purse against her chest, like a shield. And sitting in front of her was the scariest man in the room. A massive Hell's Angels biker with tattoos covering his arms, a beard streaked with gray, and a face like thunder. Everyone watched. The construction workers near the jukebox, the young mother in the corner booth, the retired couple by the window. They all held their breath. They were waiting for the biker to yell at her. They were waiting for him to tell her to get lost. They were waiting for the cruelty that the world usually dishes out to the weak and the strange. But he didn't yell. Instead, what happened in the next 60 minutes would uncover a 2-year-long nightmare, send a respectable local businessman to prison for 40 years, and save a life that everyone else had chosen to ignore. Welcome to Kindness Valley. This story proves that sometimes the safest place to be is next to the most dangerous man in the room. Before we reveal what happened at that table, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us share more stories that matter. Now, let's go back to that rainy Tuesday afternoon. It was noon, the busiest hour of the day. The diner smelled of burnt coffee, wet wool, and grease. In the middle of this chaos walked a ghost. And her name was Evelyn Brooks. She was 75 years old, though the deep lines etched into her face and the painful curve of her spine made her look much older. She moved with a heavy, dragging limp, pulling her left leg along as if it were made of lead. She wore a wool coat that was 2 sizes too big and buttoned all the way up to her chin, despite the diner being uncomfortably warm. She was walking down the center aisle, her eyes darting left and right, looking for a place to land. And the cruelty of the moment wasn't that people were staring at her, it was that they were actively pretending she didn't exist. The retired couple near the window suddenly found the view of the wet parking lot fascinating. The group of construction workers laughed loudly, turning their broad backs to block the empty chairs at their table. The young mother pulled her children closer, as if Evelyn's frailty was a contagious disease. Evelyn gripped her purse, a battered thing with a broken zipper, so tight her knuckles turned white. She looked like someone who was drowning in plain sight, waiting for a lifeline that wasn't coming. Then she stopped. At table 4 sat a mountain of a man. Cal Mercer was alone. He wore a leather vest that had seen more miles than most cars, with the Hell's Angels Death's head patch clearly visible on the back. His arms were thick, covered in ink that told stories of a hard life. He was staring at a black coffee, looking like a storm cloud waiting to break. The empty chair across from him was the only one available in the entire room. Evelyn took a shaky breath. She stepped forward. That was when she asked the question that stopped the room. Can I sit with you?" Cal slowly lifted his head. He didn't smile. His eyes were dark and hard, the kind of eyes that had seen things most people only watch in movies. He looked at her trembling hands. He looked at the sweat beading on her forehead. He looked at the terror in her eyes that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with something else. Without saying a word, Cal hooked the toe of his heavy boot around the leg of the empty chair. With a sharp screech of metal against linoleum, he dragged it out. "Sit," he rumbled. Evelyn didn't just sit. She collapsed into the chair. She sat on the very edge of the seat, ready to bolt, her body angled toward the door. When the waitress came over, looking nervous to approach the biker's table, Evelyn ordered dry toast and tea. Her voice was mechanical, rehearsed, like she was afraid asking for anything more would be a crime. Cal watched her. He took a slow sip of his coffee. He had spent 20 years in the club and 10 years before that in the service. He knew what fear looked like. He knew the difference between someone who was just nervous and someone who was hunted. He saw the way she flinched when the busboy dropped a fork. He saw the way she kept checking her watch, counting the seconds. "You keep checking the door," Cal said. His voice was deep, like gravel grinding together, but it wasn't unkind. "Who are you waiting for?" Evelyn flinched. She looked at him, her eyes wide and watery. I'm not waiting. I'm running." Cal set his cup down slowly. "Who are you running from?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper, her eyes darting around to make sure no one else could hear. "My nephew, Victor. He thinks I'm asleep. He had a meeting with a client downtown. I had a 2-hour window. I caught a ride with the mail lady. She doesn't know. Nobody knows." "Knows what?" Cal asked. Evelyn looked down at her hands, shame coloring her cheeks. "That I'm a prisoner." Evelyn Brooks had been a vibrant woman once. She had been a schoolteacher for 40 years. She had a husband who adored her until his heart gave out a decade ago. She had a garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. But at 75, age had started to take small things from her. Her balance wasn't what it used to be. She forgot names sometimes. That was when Victor showed up. Victor was her late sister's son. He was a financial planner. He wore expensive suits, drove a luxury sedan, and had a smile that could sell ice to a polar bear. He told everyone he was moving back to town to take care of his beloved aunt. The neighbors thought he was a saint. The church gave him an award for family service. "He told me my house was too big," Evelyn whispered, tears finally spilling over and tracking down her wrinkled cheeks. "He said I was forgetting to pay bills. He said I was dangerous to myself. He convinced me to sign over power of attorney just to help with the paperwork. Then he sold my house. He moved me into his garage." Cal's brow furrowed, a dangerous look entering his eyes. "The garage?" "He calls it an apartment," she said, her voice shaking. "But there's no heat. The floor is concrete. He put bars on the window. He told the neighbors I asked for them because I was afraid of burglars. And the door, he locks it from the outside. He says it's for my safety. So I don't wander off and get hurt." She stopped, choking on a sob. "He took my phone. He told the company I died to get the contract canceled. I haven't spoken to a soul in 6 months. He brings me 1 meal a day, usually cold. I'm so hungry, sir. I'm always so hungry." Cal looked at the toast on her plate. She hadn't taken a bite. She was too terrified to eat. "Why run today?" Cal asked. "Why take the risk?" Evelyn reached into her coat pocket. Her hand was shaking so badly she struggled to get it out. Finally, she produced a crumpled napkin. Inside was a small silver key. "Because I found the papers," she said. "I haven't had access to my money in 2 years. But right before I signed the papers, I rented a storage unit. I paid for 5 years in cash. I knew, somewhere deep down, I knew something was wrong. I've been hiding things in there. Papers, letters he wouldn't let me mail. Proof of what he's doing." She pushed the key across the table toward Cal. "He's not waiting for me to die naturally," she whispered. "He's rushing it. He stopped turning the breaker on for the heater at all. It was 38 degrees in my room last night. I can see my breath when I sleep." "Why are you giving me this?" Cal asked gently, covering the small key with his massive hand. "Because the mail lady is coming back in 10 minutes to pick me up," Evelyn said, looking at the clock with sheer panic. "I have to go back. If he comes home and I'm gone, he'll punish me. He stops the food, sometimes for 2 days. I can't take the hunger anymore. Please, just look at what's in the unit. What if something happens to me? Don't let him get away with it. She stood up, wincing as her bad leg took her weight. My name is Evelyn Brooks. Unit 47 at Pine Self-Storage. Please. And just like that, she was gone. A limping, terrified figure disappearing into the bright afternoon sun, leaving a Hell's Angel sitting alone with a piece of dry toast and a silver key. Cal didn't finish his coffee. He stood up, dropped a $20 bill on the table, and walked out. The diner was still quiet. People were staring at him, wondering what had happened. But Cal didn't care about them. He had a mission. He didn't go to the police station. Not yet. Cal knew how the world worked. Victor was a respectable businessman. Evelyn was a confused old woman. Without hard proof, the police would just drive her back to Victor and apologize for the inconvenience. Cal needed ammunition. He rode straight to the clubhouse. He found Ronan, the chapter president, working on the engine of his bike. Ronan was a man of few words, but he listened. He listened as Cal described the bruises he had seen peeking out from Evelyn's sleeves, finger marks shaped like a grab. He listened to the description of the hunger in her eyes. "We go to the storage unit," Ronan said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Now." What they found in Unit 47 would haunt them for the rest of their lives. It wasn't just papers. It was a chronicle of a slow-motion murder. There were copies of bank statements showing Victor withdrawing thousands of dollars for home repairs on Evelyn's sold house that never happened. There was a diary, so written in shaky handwriting, documenting the abuse. October 12th. He took my winter coat today. Said I don't need it inside. It's freezing. November 4th. I asked for my glasses. He laughed. He said I don't need to read anymore. But the most damning piece of evidence was a file Evelyn had managed to steal from Victor's home office. It contained a life insurance policy taken out on Evelyn Brooks 3 months ago. And stapled to the back of it was a printout of funeral arrangements. Victor had already picked out the casket. He had already paid the deposit for the cremation. He wasn't waiting for nature to take its course. He was planning the date. "He's going to kill her," Cal said, his voice low and dangerous, echoing off the metal walls of the storage unit. "He's drained the accounts. The house is sold. She's worth more to him dead now." Ronan looked at the papers, his jaw set like stone. "Call the detective, the one we trust. Tell him we have everything he needs, but we aren't waiting for a warrant to make a move. We need to buy her time. We need to make sure he's too scared to touch her until the cops get there." The plan they came up with wasn't violent. It was psychological. They needed to terrify Victor so deeply that he wouldn't dare open that garage door. The next morning, Victor stepped out of his pristine, 2-story suburban house. He adjusted his silk tie, checked his expensive watch, and looked toward his luxury car. That's when he froze. Sitting across the street, directly facing his driveway, were 3 motorcycles. The engines were off. The riders were silent. Cal was in the middle, his arms crossed over his chest, and staring straight at Victor. He didn't make a gesture. He didn't shout. He just watched. Victor tried to ignore them. He got into his car and drove to work. The bikes followed. They didn't tailgate. They didn't speed. They just stayed in his rearview mirror, a constant, rumbling reminder. When Victor walked into a restaurant for lunch with a wealthy client, 2 bikers were already sitting in the booth next to his reserved table. They didn't speak to him. They just watched him eat. Victor was sweating. He couldn't focus on his pitch. He spilled his water glass. His hands were shaking. By the 3rd day, Victor was unraveling. He called the police to report harassment. When the patrol car arrived, the bikers were simply parked legally on the street, drinking coffee from paper cups. Is there a law against parking? The officer? Ronan asked politely. No, the officer sighed, looking at Victor, who was screaming on his front lawn, looking completely unhinged. No, there isn't. The pressure worked. Victor was too scared to go into the garage. He was too paranoid that someone was filming him. He didn't know what they knew, but he knew something was wrong. On the fourth day, the warrant came through. The raid wasn't subtle. 4 police cruisers screeched into the driveway, followed by the roar of 6 motorcycles blocking the street to ensure no escape. Officers kicked open the side door of the garage. The smell hit them first. The smell of mold, unwashed clothes, and despair. It was freezing inside, colder than the air outside. Evelyn was sitting on a cot, wrapped in thin blankets, shivering violently. A bucket in the corner served as her bathroom. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling. When the officer helped her up, she was too weak to walk. They had to carry her out. As they brought her into the daylight, the neighbors gasped. They came out of their houses and saw the truth. They saw the beloved aunt, who looked like a concentration camp survivor. They saw the bars on the windows they had ignored for 2 years. They saw the monster in the suit. Victor was led out in handcuffs, his face pale, his expensive suit rumpled. He tried to shout that it was a misunderstanding, that he was a caregiver, that she was mentally ill, but nobody was listening. The evidence was in the cold garage. The evidence was in the starving woman. Evelyn was placed on a stretcher by the paramedics. She looked around, dazed by the light and the noise, until her eyes locked onto the line of motorcycles parked at the curb. She saw Cal. She raised a trembling hand. Cal. Cal stepped past the police line. The officers let him through. He walked up to the stretcher and took her small, cold hand in his massive, calloused one. "I'm here, Evelyn," he said softly. "You're safe. He's never coming back." "You believed me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Nobody else looked at me. Nobody else saw me. But you believed me." "You asked to sit," Cal said, his voice thick with emotion. That's all it took. The trial was swift. The evidence from the storage unit, the diary, the financial records, the pre-planned funeral, was irrefutable. The jury didn't need long to deliberate. Victor Brooks was convicted of kidnapping, elder abuse, grand larceny, and attempted murder. The judge, disgusted by the cruelty of the crime, sentenced him to 40 years without the possibility of parole. But the story doesn't end in a courtroom. Evelyn didn't have family left, but she found a new one. She moved into a beautiful assisted living facility with a garden view. She gained weight. The color returned to her cheeks. She started painting again. Bright, vibrant watercolors of landscapes and flowers. Things she had dreamed of while locked in the dark. And every Tuesday at noon, a strange and wonderful tradition began. The staff at the local diner pushes 2 tables together. They put out a reserved sign. The door opens, and Evelyn walks in. She is 76 now, and she still uses a cane, but she walks with her head held high. And flanking her, like a royal guard, are 4 burly men in leather vests. Cal pulls out her chair. They sit. They drink coffee. They laugh about the weather and art and motorcycles. The town got used to it. The fear of the bikers faded, replaced by respect. People started to realize that the scariest monsters aren't the ones on motorcycles. They are the ones who smile and tell you everything is for your own good. And the heroes? Sometimes they look like villains. Evelyn painted a picture for the clubhouse. It hangs above the pool table, right in the center of the wall where everyone can see it. It's a painting of a single empty chair at a diner table, bathed in golden light. Underneath, she wrote a simple inscription: "The seat that saved my life." This story reminds us that evil often thrives in silence. It thrives when good people decide to mind their own business. It thrives when we look away from the things that make us uncomfortable. Evelyn was invisible to everyone in that diner except for the one man who had seen enough darkness to recognize a cry for help. Cal Mercer could have ignored the old woman. He could have eaten his lunch and gone about his day. But he didn't. He looked. He listened. And because of that, a life was saved. So, the next time you see someone who looks lost, someone who looks invisible to the rest of the world, don't look away. Be the one who pulls out the chair. Be the one who says, "Sit with me." Thank you for watching this episode of Kindness Valley. If this story touched your soul, please share it with your friends and family. You never know who needs to hear it. Don't forget to leave a comment below about a time a stranger helped you, and subscribe to our channel. We will see you in the next video. Until then, be kind, be brave, and never be afraid to sit with a stranger.